Hi, I'm Kent. Let's mix up some glaze. I'm about to do my next glaze firing and I want to go ahead and glaze this. This is a test piece I made a couple videos ago. Basically went from slip to bisque in a day. And now it's time for the associated glaze firing. I made this piece so I could test glazes to put in the different holes. So the idea is that this will be a lamp, and I've done a few of these, and I'm doing a couple different tests here. One is I have a bunch of different size holes that I made with a punch. And then the other thing I want to do is go ahead and glaze these holes. So I'm going to put a light in the bottom here. There's actually light that glows through and it shines through the glaze as a translucent effect. It's translucent in this glaze because it has some titanium dioxide in it. And I'm curious what will happen if I just put a clear base glaze on. One of the things I want to try and check is if I can have different glazes that fill these holes differently. So when glazes get up to temperature in the glaze firing, they become fluid, not like water fluid because then they would run down on the shelf, but maybe kind of like honey, I think. And as a fluid, they have a bunch of different properties to them. One of the properties that changes is basically how runny the glaze is, and that depends upon a whole bunch of different factors, both with the temperature and the application and the glaze chemistry itself. And I only know a little bit about these. But I kind of want the opposite to happen here. I don't want a runny glaze. I actually want a glaze that will stay in place and basically build up a little mound over each of these little holes and not run down the surface. So here are two commercial glazes that I have, and this kind of shows that runny effect. Here it's basically dripped down when it got molten and actually formed a little bit of a drip down here. Didn't go too far though. So this is again kind of the opposite of what we want. And this commercial glaze also has a similar effect where these kind of striations that run down the sides. A little bit on the opposite end are gloopy glazes, so ones that can form the drips and hold them. So there's one here on the outside, but actually the inside there's several of them. So this is just a planter, so these will never really be seen except for you guys. There's a drip that ran down there and held. There's actually a couple of them. And so there's basically a tension, quite literally, between the surface tension of the glaze and the fluidity. And I want something with a high surface tension. And again, that's so it can form a little dome bubble over the little hole. At least that's the hope. I kind of discovered this idea of using glaze for transparent windows by accident, but of course it's been done before. Apparently there's a practice in China from long ago where they would carve out little holes and glaze their porcelain and have clearer-ish windows in them as well. So what you saw me do at the beginning is basically get out all the ingredients for two different glazes. So I have a variety of different glazes that I use. Some of them are commercial. The ones that I mix up, I tend to use Old Forge Creations, first 5 recipes. So here is his gloss base recipe. The idea is you can mix this up and then add some other ingredients to get it different colors. So for instance, you can add cobalt to get it a nice blue. Often you'll add in an opacifier as well. So this requires just 5 main ingredients: nepheline cyanide, silica, EPK, ferrofrit 3134. I've gotten that wrong before. Whitening, and then there's a small addition of bentonite, which I think helps with the suspension of the glaze. And I was looking online at Digital Fire for some other reasons, and I found another glaze that I wanted to try. So this is the G292B glaze, and it has many of the same ingredients. So the nepheline cyanide, the ferrofrit 3134, so the same frit, EPK, has silica, and then 2 different ingredients, wollastonite and talc. And again, I don't really know about the glaze chemistries here. I'm sure I could go look on Glazy and see how they're different, but when I was looking at the pictures for this one, it looked like it had a high surface tension and potentially would work well for my applications. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up 2 small batches of this and basically use them plain. And then I have a whole series of holes here. I'm basically going to do a couple of sets and then fill them all in. So the other test here is going to see what the light looks like at the end, shining through these different size holes, how it applies to the different size holes, things like that. So let's go ahead and mix up the Old Forge Creations recipe first. So here has the percentages. These basically add up to 100, and then there's additions at the bottom, so we'll actually get to 102. I'm going to go ahead and do 100 grams of this, so we'll end up with 102 grams total. And I need to measure out all of these different ingredients one at a time. So I can set these 2 off to the side. And I'll put the pot on the shelf where it's nice and safe. All right, I think I get everything set up. So basically we're just gonna go through one at a time, measuring things out. I got a small little container here. I've got my scale will tear out, and I've got my respirator. We don't want to be breathing silica dust in particular. So we'll just go down the line and get these all together. So first is the ethylene cyanide. Silica. Alright, next up is EPK, but I'm going to go ahead and use another container just in case I get too much. I can't take it back out of there, but I can take it back out of here. So 15. And the Frit 3134. Switch over to the high precision scale. So mixing a glaze is basically that easy. You just want to be careful to measure things out, just like you're baking. You want to get things kind of as exact as you can. Make sure you have the right ingredients. One of the things I've been doing wrong actually is you want to mix this dry. So I just got a lid, and I'm going to put it on and shake it around. Make sure there isn't any dust being kicked up. And we'll add the water in a second. And let me go ahead and do the second glaze, basically more of the same. Alright, there you go. There's that one. Alright, just wiped everything down. Let's give these a good shake again. Make sure the lid's on. So next up we want to add the water. So for the first 5 he recommends 90 grams of water per 100 grams of dry, and we have 100 grams of dry. Alright, 92, it's close. And we'll do the same for this one. Alright. So that's it, we have some glazes, at least the beginnings of glazes. So next up is really to mix these really well to make sure everything gets nice and hydrated. I should also note that while mixing glazes is relatively simple, basically just measure everything out. Mixing these small quantities is actually relatively hard because you're getting down to like 2 grams. So if you multiply this by 10, it'd be way easier. You're not measuring 20 grams. And I think I'm just going to put the lid on and shake vigorously. Well, the other thing I want to do, give them a quick shake. So I've been keeping the paper nearby, but I want to go ahead and label these. So these are just deli containers. I could just write on the lids, but I don't have to worry about removing the ink off of the container. So let's get some packing tape and put on there. And I'll also do the sides because more than once I have set the lid off to the side and not remembered which one went with which. And since many glazes basically look the same at this point, it's really tricky to figure out what you have. So this one here is the first 5 gloss base. And this one here is G2926B gloss. All right, you guys probably can't read my handwriting, but I can, so good enough. So there's nothing hanging out on the bottom here. Yeah, like that. So I'm going to go ahead and let these hydrate, and we'll come back to it in a little bit. All right, those have sat around for a while, and I've shaken them a bunch, so I think we're probably good to go. So next thing to do is think about how I'm going to get the glaze in the holes. So I found these little applicator bottles that come with these lids and these little syringe type thingies that go on the top. So I'm going to try and use that to fill in the holes with glaze. So let's do the first 5 gloss first. So let's see if I can get a little bit of glaze into here. And just like I want to keep track of the glaze in its containers, I also want to keep track of the glaze that's on here. So I have a pattern here of holes where it goes biggest to smallest and the biggest to smallest again. So basically I want to do one section with one glaze and one section with the other. So I'm going to get my underglaze pencil here and I'm just going to write on the bottom. All right, I scribble that on. Again, I think I can read that. So the first 5, I think it's going to be easiest to do the smallest holes. Dribble some on here. It's running down the inside, which isn't much of a surprise, and it didn't actually fill the hole. Okay, it's just running down the inside. All right, I've got a plan B. I'm going to wipe this off. All right, so I figured I might need a backer. And so I went and got a balloon. So we're going to blow this up inside and hope that the rubber isn't pushing out too hard because I don't want to break the bisque, but provides enough of a backing so that there's some place for the glaze to sit. I think for the bigger holes, it's going to be even more important. So I'm just going to go ahead and blow this up inside of the sphere. And then I 3D printed a tie, so I don't have to worry about tying it, and I can undo it easily. And obviously you can just blow it up the regular way as well. All right, so let's try this again. So these already have some glaze in them, so probably not good tests. All right, we definitely have some holes here, so I'll do back a little bit more. So the balloon's acting as a bit of a backer, but not completely for sure. All right, I want that set, so now I want to do the opposite holes on the other side. Same thing. All right, let's check the other side out. So definitely the larger holes have receded. I'll let this set and dry for a second, and then we'll do the other holes with the other gloss, with the other glaze. All right, I've gone over all the holes several times. Some of them are still looking a little bit cratered, but it's kind of built up around the edges, so I can't tell if it needs more or not. The bisque is also starting to change colors. It's starting to get more pinky, so it's absorbing the liquid. So I think I want to go ahead and let it dry. And I suspect I'll leave the balloon in there while it does that. So let me go ahead and let this glaze set up and get nice and hard, and then we'll come back to it and see what we want to do next. I suspect I'm going to want to go ahead and either shave off or sponge off the excess glaze so it's not sticking up too much, but it's definitely too wet for that right now. Go ahead and put the glaze back in. And then I can wash out these little bottles. Back in a second for you, be a while for me. All right, what you saw me just do is take a little bit of water and go ahead and wipe back the glaze on the bottom half here. I want to test what it looks like wiped back versus just kind of as I applied it. And overall, I got really good coverage. There's a few small pinholes here that are sunk down just a little bit, but most of them have applied relatively well. That means that I think this glaze on the top here is proud of the surface, which is okay. That's why we're doing the test. I want to see what it looks like. And with the sponge, I was basically careful to make sure I didn't wipe back too much. I didn't want to pull out the glaze. And of course I removed the balloon and I could see these little glaze dots on it. That was kind of fun too. And there's a little bit of glaze on the inside, but really not too much. All right, so what I want to do now is go ahead and let this dry out again so that the water from the sponge gets out of the bisque. It's gonna dry out. And then I want to go ahead and apply glaze to half of this. So we have 4 sections here, 2 with the first 5 and 2 with the digital fire. And then we have that again on the other side. So basically half of this I want to go ahead and glaze with a cover glaze. And the other half I'm going to leave raw besides the holes. So as my cover glaze, I'm going to go ahead and use this. This is a glaze from Joe that has some titanium dioxide on it. Basically, it will fire to an off-white. It's actually this glaze here that I showed you at the beginning. So it's mostly translucent. It has this kind of creamy white color. And then so by glazing one half of it, we can see how the glaze in the holes interacts with the surface glaze. Obviously, each of the surface glazes I may want to use are different, so this is just going to be a rough idea if it's worth exploring some more or not. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry out, and off camera go ahead and glaze the half of it, and once that's done, we'll go ahead and come back and show you. Here we go, all glazed, or maybe I should say half glazed. So I went ahead and sprayed this on. I got my air compressor sorted out. I've been trying spraying a little bit more. So basically masked off one half and then put a coat on this side here. On the top, you can definitely still see the whole glaze coming through. And on the bottom, it's a little bit more even. Let me go ahead and put this into the next glaze firing and we'll see how it turns out. We had a successful firing. So this turned out well. There are definitely several things to note, and we'll go through and walk through them. First is it didn't crack, which is great. Since this was the pot that I went ahead and bisqued so fast, I was worried about that. And I went ahead and put a light on the bottom. That's why that hole was there. But let me turn it off so you guys can see a little bit better. So the glaze side looks good, and the unglazed does as well. Let's go through and look at one set of glaze at a time. So this is the first 5, and one of the first things I saw was that there's a few holes that didn't get covered, and in general this glaze seems to be rather concave. It's kind of recessed in. The bottom 2 rows where I wiped off seem good. The top 3 rows here, there definitely is some glaze that kind of spilled over onto the clay body itself. So that's less than ideal. I think with lights on, probably no one would see it, but it'd be nice to be able to have something more clean. So then turning over, this here is the digital fire recipe. And it also looks really good. I don't have any holes in this glaze. Again, the bottom 2 where I wiped it off seems good. The top ones too overall seem good. There's only one here that looks like the glaze kind of spilled over onto the clay. Maybe there's a little bits here and there, but it seems cleaner than the other one. All right, flipping around again. So this is with the cover glaze, and this seemed to work pretty well. Obviously, we don't have these problems with the glaze spilling over. I do have another small little pinhole here, and there's more down here at the bottom. So it didn't cover the hole as well as I wanted. And then finally, the digital fire glaze. Again, this worked really well. I don't see any pinholes. Where it spilled over on top, I don't notice anything at all. And the bottom seems okay. This one here is recessed a little bit, but it's still completely covered. So that's great. There definitely is a difference in these 2 glazes, and I was curious about that, and we see it here in the pot. The digital fire glaze is able to span those holes better than the first 5 glaze. I was also worried about how it would look when it was glazed, if they would interact in some funny way, and at least with this off-white glaze, I don't see anything. We'll see when we get into more interesting glazes what happens. The other thing I was curious about was the size of the holes and which ones I liked best. It might not come across well on video, but I've been looking at this for a while, and I think I really like this column here. I think it's similar to the unglazed one I did originally. The small ones are also nice. I think I would have to test putting in a whole lot more and seeing if I like that effect, but I think one of these 2 would be good. Which is also nice because these holes were easier to fill up than the big ones. So that's a benefit. I'll cover the top so the exposure is a little bit better. So there are the big holes there. going down to the two smallest. So this again is the digital fire recipe. So I think all of those look really good. And then to the unglazed side, again, these all look really good. Got a nice warm glow to it. So I think between two glazes, the digital fire is the right one to go with this approach and doing this rice grain effect. If I'm going to leave it unglazed, then I want to go ahead and wipe it back. If I'm going to put a cover glaze on it, it seems like it probably doesn't matter so much. So overall, that was a very useful test. I think I'm going to go ahead and mix up some more of the digital fire glaze, and we'll go ahead and make some more lamps in the future. That might be a little while though, because I have some other things I want to go ahead and try out. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.